Hey, so I recorded this run off stream and without any face cam or voice. So I thought I would do a little bit of commentary over the top. At the time of recording, this is the current world record run of the All Clans Unseeded speedrun. So the All Clans Unseeded really means that you go through every clan, you go through each clan once as primary and once as secondary. We set up what we think is a pretty optimal series of runs, and I've ordered them more or less based in terms of, in my experience, what tends to be the most RNG setups. So I started here with the Hellhorn and Stygian Guard. This is the classic Inferno plus spell weakness build. You're looking for minus cost on your Inferno. You're looking for holdover. Later on, you duplicate it. You try to get double stack onto your spell weakness. Holdover as well. Duplicate it a few times, and then remove cards as needed. This was definitely one of the fastest getting into it. I mean, I started basically with a seed that worked, which is pretty unusual, but I definitely won't complain about that. And got really lucky, got an early holdover, got an early spell weakness, so we're really set up quite well. You can see at the bottom there on the times, you can see the current time is just over 9 minutes. So definitely a lot of room to improve there. I mean, the world record is for Hellhorn is well under 6 minutes, and I would say pretty standard is between 6 and 7 minutes. You do have to consider that with the unseeded run, and this is one of the things that I like about the unseeded run, is you have to consider not just the time of each run, but also the time in between counts towards your overall time. So it includes your re-rolls, it includes your between game menuing, so all of that is part of the run. And here we're just trying to make some good decisions around data lists, deciding when is it worth reducing damage, when is it worth just putting more damage on the data list. Here we have a pretty quick kill, a little bit of decision making that slowed us down, but overall a pretty fast dataless fight here. You get the extra ember in order to be able to play out both Infernos every turn. So now I have these 2 Infernos with holdover. I'm now going for double stack, got it, and I'll re-roll for holdover. We also got it, so really, really great seed here. And that's really the hallmark of this run in general, is I got a lot of really, really great seeds. Of course, it's not just luck, right? You have to execute very well, and this is where all the practice comes in, but I'm not going to say that this entire run is due to my excellent mechanics, because for sure there are others like Sinus and Chance-Eluded and Narninian who are also very good with their mechanics, and then it's really a mix of having the right mechanics, making the right decisions, and then a little bit of luck, making sure you get good seeds that can help you get through the runs fast. So we're pretty fast right now. I would say we're on par for somewhere around a 7-minute to 8-minute run right now. I am going to remove, normally when I'm doing single attempts for the Hellhorned, I don't necessarily remove because it is a little bit of time. But ever since we figured out that you can use the select button or select key in order to get through some of those dialogue boxes, I feel like the consistency of getting the cards you need early is worth the tiny bit of time loss you get from having to do the removes. And if you haven't seen this run before, you'll notice that oftentimes I'm not actually clearing all the floors. That's due to Energy Siphon being a targeted spell. So Energy Siphon, you have to have a target in order to play it. Unlike something like Urchin Spines, where Urchin Spines you can play it on a full row, even an empty row, and it will play. Same with Inferno. With Energy Siphon, you actually need a target. So keeping Flora alive all the way into the boss is advisable to make sure that you have it on holdover for when you are on the boss's Relentless. And now we're mostly just skipping, looking for duplicates, but otherwise just skipping most of the floors. And we get really unlucky with this Fel fight. Getting Fel, who puts blights in your deck, is just really a bad experience. There I missed an energy siphon that I could have played out. But I'm really focused right now on just trying to clear out these enemies which are putting blights in my deck. It's very annoying. Here I even go out of my way to energy siphon and torch just to make sure I'm not going to get any more blights in my deck. I think this is the last of the Fel blights that we're going to get. And we got her now. So with all the holdovers and the energy siphons, we're set. But really annoying fight. Definitely, I don't think we could have even ended the turn early with that energy siphon, but it is definitely not optimal to miss that energy siphon early. But I think I handled it pretty well, considering it's one of the biggest slowdowns if you happen to get that particular Fel fight. Now we're just removing again. We are skipping all of the bonuses and going straight into ring number 7. So we lost a little bit of time on the Fel fight, but we should be still pretty close to targeting around just under 8 minutes total for the run, which would be about a minute 19 improvement. So here I missed that unit at the top. It's not a big deal, but it does add a little bit of time to sit through that animation. And of course there's always the risk that you could get extra pyre damage, which kills you, but to be honest, I'm not too afraid about that. And now we're at the point where we can just blast out our spells. The boss should die on the second floor. If you think about the total damage output per turn right now, with 2 double stacked energy siphons, those are each an extra 100 damage per spell weakness. So that's 4 spell weakness plus 2 infernos, about 600 damage per full combo. Now with the 3rd energy siphon, it adds another 200, so putting it up to 800 damage per full combo. With Seraph, you have to be a little bit careful, especially because Seraph spawns units. We want to make sure that we're not having units get to our pyre. We also get pretty good setup here with Seraph landing right where those units are. I am going to go out of my way a little bit to try to reduce the amount of damage we're taking and also to eliminate some of those enemies. I am really nervous about getting blown out by some of the heavy damage dealers, so I think it's kind of advisable to try to clear that out, and we get Fel. So sub 8 minute, which is really good for an unseeded all clans. It's not really good if you're looking at just Hellhorn independent. Really, you're looking again for something between 6 minutes and 6 minutes 30 seconds would be perfect. But in a run like this, it's absolutely fine if you consider the time we spent re-rolling. Although in this case, we didn't really re-roll much. So now we're getting into the second fight. Second fight is Stygian Guard plus Awoken. We're going to drop the Covenant rank down to 0. And this is a really simple run. There is a little bit of RNG to it, but basically the goal of this run is you want Tethys with, first off, we want a different, we want Seraph the Temperate. So we're gonna hard reroll for Seraph the Temperate. I think we'll get it pretty quick. And what we're looking for then is a tank to put in front of Tethys. We will stack regen on the tank, whatever tank we end up using, and then Tethys is there to just deal all the damage. So we get Tethys with Frostbite, and then we get some big tank that we can put in the front. I would say probably the best tank to get is the Thorned Hollow, because one of the biggest weaknesses of Tethys is that Tethys can't hit the back line unless you add sweep, and we're really not interested in adding a lot of sweep. We actually get, I won't say lucky, but we do take benefit from the fact that we rolled an artifact which gives health to Tethys. There's also one of the problems with Tethys is that oftentimes Tethys can die to sweep units that do like 3 or 4 damage. And with 6 health as the base, we're actually not too worried about Tethys taking damage. I take a little bit too long making some of these decisions. What we're looking for maybe is like a big rejuvenation. Something like Awake would be great. So we take the Awoken Hollow. Again, it's not quite as good as the Thorned Hollow. We are going to add some spikes to hopefully get rid of some of the enemies. And then we're going to skip here and hope for something better. Ideally, we get something like Large Stone, which just keeps it alive a lot better and gives it some damage. So we have our tank, and now we're just putting as much regen as possible on the tank so that it can protect Tethys while Tethys does big frostbite and pure damage to the boss. And what we're going to be doing throughout this run is trying to clean out all of the non-restore, non-rejuvenation cards. Again, we didn't really see any good rejuvenations, and I'm skipping outright the Stygian Guard cards. There's not really anything that I would say is good enough to justify putting into the deck. We checked to see if there's anything interesting. There's not really much there. I probably could have just skipped altogether. There's also a thought of you could duplicate one of your restores, but I really don't think it's necessary. You start off already with enough that you should be fine. Now here I'm going to play up on the second floor. I don't want to start already getting hit with a bomb. My Awoken Hollow doesn't actually have that much health at the beginning. It has health from its summon, but you have to heal up to that health. So just to protect some of the health, we put up on the second floor. It does slow us down a bit, but I think there was actually a pretty good chance that it would have died outright from some of the early damage. But now we are stacking enough regen that we should be just fine. Now we're not stacking crazy amounts of regen. We're sitting at like 5, 6 regen, and we get a very unlucky roll there. That was actually an accident. I wasn't intending to just end the turn, but turns out it's okay. With Tethys, you end up doing a lot of damage very quickly. It only needs a few hits. I do consider for a while there Adaptive Mutation, but again, we're not wanting our Awoken Hollow to do damage. We want it to absorb. I also considered getting a second unit, but I don't think it's that valuable. I mean, you could consider getting like the Titan Sentry or something like that, but it's not really necessary. So now we get the Large Stone we wanted. That helps a lot with keeping our Awoken Hollow alive. And we upgrade Tethys. I even remove a few Train Stewards just to smooth out the deck. Probably even better would have been to remove some of the Frozen Lances instead, because what you can do is you get rid of the Frozen Lances, you can play out Train Stewards, and then they're out of your deck. But with Frozen Lances, even if you play them right, they still come back into your deck. And this is something that I've been picking up more and more on my speedruns, is realizing that, you know, in I would say 90% of the time when you're playing just by yourself, doing Covenants or daily challenges or whatever, you know, you always want to get rid of the Train Stewards because they're just pretty garbage units. But in these types of runs, actually, the Train Stewards are not that bad. One of the best things about them is that you can play them and then they're gone, and you never have to worry about them again. Whereas with these, you know, Frozen Lances or Torches or whatever, if you don't get rid of them, they keep clogging up your deck over and over again. So there's the Awake that we wanted. Now we should have more than enough regen in order to survive even the tougher bosses. The only real issue right now is we don't have any real AoE. For the most part on Covenant 1, the enemies, you're not going to get a lot of double spawns where you're going to get like 2 160 health units in a row. It's not so common. So there's not a whole lot of risk here. Actually, not even Covenant 1, we're on Covenant 0, so even less likely. So I don't think it's too much of a risk here, but it is something to consider. The fact that we really don't have any AoE other than the 4 spikes that we put onto our Awoken Hollow as an upgrade. Which is, again, exactly why I did that. Any other upgrade I would really struggle against enemies like this. I'd have to start really, like, either getting an AoE spell or something else. But the fact that we have those 4 spikes, you can see, is helping us out a ton. But you can see, like here, we're leaking some of these enemies where they had 2 high health enemies in a row, and we can't kill the first one with our Awoken Hollow, then they leak through. But ended up not taking any pyre damage anyway, just because of the... we got Relentless by the time that the enemy got to the top floor, so we were just fine. You'll also notice that I am minusing the cost of a lot of my spells. That's 2 reasons. So one is, of course, we want more regen, so the more we can play, the better. But the other part of it is like a mental thing. I end up getting the train steward thing. And then my thought is, why not just have like one train steward is just really good to clean up some of the garbage. So I end up buffing up both train stewards, getting them the upgrade, and then putting them on another floor, just so that we have a way to clean out those extra units that leak through. The other benefit too is on Seraph specifically. Seraph's AI will automatically sap. If there's only one floor, Seraph will automatically sap that floor over and over and over again. Now you see we got unlucky again, getting a second Seraph with the blights, but it's okay. This one's much more manageable. It's annoying, but basically we're not really desperate to play out cards, so it's not as big of a risk as like with the other run that we were doing, the Hellhorn run. There it's a big deal because you can't get the holdovers, you can't do the damage. But here it's like, okay, yeah, we don't get some regen, but we have more than enough health, we have more than enough regen to take out Fel. And with our champion, Tethys, having so much frostbite damage, we're really not at risk. So even now, we haven't been able to play Awake once, and we still have plenty of health, plenty of regen, and Fel's not going to be able to even get through without playing a single restore. We would have been just fine. But yeah, so back to my other point, the reason why I'm minusing costs is just for pure brain power, right? Like if I can have enough 0-cost spells, I can just press the one key over and over again and not have to worry at all, think at all about what spells come up. That's kind of the idea. And that's really a big part of, I mean, you may not think like it's a big deal, but if you see some of my runs, maybe on stream, where I don't get, for example, a holdover early on an Inferno in a Hellhorn run, there's so much brain power in just like remembering and watching to see, excuse me, watching to see which one of the cards is the Inferno, and then remembering to use that key, not a different key. Whereas if you get holdover, it's always going to be the first card you draw. They're always going to get played. They're always going to be drawn in the order that you played them. So you can just basically have a mental note. Okay, how many holdovers have I played? Okay, then I start and do 4-4-4-4-4 or 3-3-3-3-3-3-3 or 5-5. You know, whatever. Having that lack of having to think and just being able to just push keys quickly, it ends up adding a lot of time having to think through which cards to play. So yeah, as you can see, we're really not having any trouble. And this is what's great. Sin has found some really great setups here on these Awoken, both Awoken primary and secondary, where you really can eliminate a lot of the risk by playing on Covenant 0, getting Seraph the Temperance, and then just stacking restores. It turns out that stacking restores is just a really consistent strategy to win. Now, Seraph's a little bit tricky, and again, I mentioned this. It's quite important that we have these extra train stewards because we're going to really take advantage of all of the saps that get put onto the train stewards, and you'll see that later on when we're struggling to just kill units. It's one of the biggest problems with having low damage multi-strikers like these train stewards, is they just struggle to get out enough damage to kill units. But even having them out there is a benefit because it means that Seraph is not sapping Tethys and he's not sapping our Awoken Hollow, which helps to get some of these units dead before they even reach the train stewards. But you can see here, I mean, we're leaking a 120 health unit here, so we are struggling to burn through. Luckily, we came here with plenty of Pyre health, but I was getting nervous as I was playing out the last part of this run. You know, am I even going to survive? Luckily, we have plenty of health, plenty of regen, and Tethys just does an insane amount of frostbite damage if you even get just 4 or 5 hits, and Seraph goes down. So we're still, I wouldn't say like crazy ahead here, but we are ahead of our normal time now. We were slightly slower on the last run, mostly due to the fact that we got the Awoken Hollow, and I was using my brain a little bit too much on some of the card decisions. But it's okay. We're still ahead overall. We're definitely on track to get under an hour. And now we get into the Awoken Run. And the Awoken Run is even less brain power than the Stygian Guard Run. We get really lucky and get Temperament very quickly. One of the best parts about this run compared to the other is that you start with your tank, and so then any damage unit at all as a backliner is going to be pure gravy for you. So even having a train steward at the beginning is totally fine here for the amount of damage that we do. Now, ideally, what you want to pair with your sentient, because we are doing a rejuvenation-based sentient, is you really want to pair it with some kind of sweep. That's the best, right? If you get one of the 2 sweep units that the Awoken get, then you're able to take out backliners, because that's one of the main issues is the sentient with rejuvenation triggers is fantastic when it comes to just pure damage on a frontliner, but it's not so great when you're trying to get backliners. And what I did there is, you notice I did a double stack on the restore. I'm not planning to take any cards, so I'm just going starting deck and then a single unit. And so getting that double stack just means that I get 1 extra regen, which sometimes makes a difference in keeping your sentient alive. And then, of course, trying to make as many of them as free as possible for the reasons I stated earlier, mostly just brain power. I played up on the top floor because we have the rage units, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be at risk. Now you'll notice I don't even torch because I just want to get through it faster. So I'm totally fine with the boss getting up there. I thought about it for a second, and then I thought, nah, I'm good. I'll just send him up there. And you'll see we ended up doing that just fine. All right, so we're cruising. I would say we're about similar speed. Now here's where I really debate for a minute. Am I actually going to take this Demon Fiend? I thought, okay, so we have one fight, we can't play it. We can't play it against Daedalus. But then immediately after Daedalus, we can start playing the Demon Fiend. We can take 1 Ember. Normally you would take draw and get 2 draw and then just play out, but I thought, yeah, let's get him. He's a really good damage dealer. If we get multi-strike on him, even better. And so, yeah, we play it like this with... and I try to play the Demon Fiend and remember that I can't. But we're totally fine against Daedalus, especially this particular Daedalus. The Daedaluses that are really, I would say, anxiety-inducing are the Double Bomb if you don't have torches. Now, in this case, we have torches, so actually Double Bomb would have been just fine. But the worst one is getting the Extinguish triggers, doing damage to your units. It's really brutal, especially on fights like this, where you're already taking a lot of damage on your sentient. A little bit of a misplay there, but and this is where I got a little anxious until I played out all those rejuvenations, and then we were fine. And those restores, I was a little bit like, I don't know if we're gonna survive this fight, but ended up doing just fine. So we take the Ember cost. Now we can play the Demon Fiend, which is really good. We're gonna go for some Demon Fiend upgrades. There's not really anything to duplicate. And we get multi-strike, which is fantastic. And then I think, you know what, I'm just going to get Rage and then move on. Need to upgrade the Sentient. That is a surefire way to lose. Although I did once forget to upgrade Tethys to Frostbite level 3. Somehow still survived. So you don't necessarily have to upgrade all 3, but I would recommend it if you have a champion-based deck. So this Demon Fiend's really going to help out with clearing off backliners. I can burst the front units with my Sentient, and you'll see I'm not even playing torches. I'm just literally playing regens and train stewards. So if I see a restore, I play a restore. And the moment I see the X, I just play. So trying to go as optimally as possible, use as little keystrokes, and just try to get to end turns as fast as possible. And you'll see I missed an Awake, but again, we're not really that worried about the regen not being enough. Especially with Seraph, the Temperament, there's not really a lot of stress, right? Now there's a thought with the stealth that maybe we play up on another floor, but I was thinking, honestly, we're probably going to be fine. With all the rejuvenation triggers I'm getting, the fact that all of my restores are more or less free, I have a double stacked one, I'm thinking, yeah, I probably have enough damage to just burn through. I mean, you see almost all my restores are free at this point, and I have plenty of Ember, even if they weren't free, to play them out. Really don't like these torches. I do occasionally play one, but I just really focused on train stewards and restores. And yeah, you can see, even without playing any of the restores, we would have been just fine on the boss with all of the rejuvenation triggers. And that's actually really nice. Like, there are most things don't hit, right? I mean, at least most damage-oriented things aren't going to hit the stealth boss. But it's really great that the rejuvenation triggers do, that spikes do, that spells do. And as long as you have any one of those, it tends to be one of the easier bosses because it has a lower health total due to the stealth. I think it's kind of how they balanced that boss. Okay, so we're on to Fell, and we are thrilled that it is not Blight Fell. I am absolutely fine to take Rage. Even if we end up taking a little bit of pyre damage, I would much rather have a little bit of pyre damage than all those animations of those blights. And even here you see we're totally fine just burning through. The reason I wanted to, by the way, kill that one unit with the torch is just so that I could get a rejuvenation trigger onto Fell, try to get some more damage. I'm not going to torch Fell. I mean, 2 damage here or there isn't going to make a huge difference. But if I can get a full regen trigger, that ends up being really, that saves not, I wouldn't say a lot of time, but it does save some time being able to get some early damage. And you'll see we're absolutely fine here. I mean, we have a 100 damage Demon Fiend, which is also really great for time, right? So that animation of hitting twice is much faster than a rejuvenation trigger. So I'm thrilled that we have such a strong unit behind. Saves us a lot of time on especially Relentless, killing those bosses fast. So again, upgrade the Sentient and skip right into the fight, and we're making really good time. You can see now we're looking at something around 20, oh no, even longer, like past 30 minutes. So, or I don't know, I can't, it's too small for me to read right now, but definitely much longer than we're at right now. So we're almost finished with this, and then and I would say up until now we had some time savings, right? We had about a minute that we saved on the Hellhorn run compared to our best when doing this All Clans run, and we lost a little bit of that time on the Stygian Guard. So I would say we're about on par, as long as we don't make any mistakes, to get to under an hour, but nothing crazy right now. The real time savings is going to come later on. You'll see that in the Melting Remnant run. But yeah, so we're still making good time though. You'll also notice that I torched my Sentient a few times in that last battle. That's one of the other reasons why getting rid of the torches is really valuable, so you don't accidentally torch yourself. And so here, now it's just, I know I can play out all the train stewards, so it's play all my restores onto the Sentient and then play out my train stewards as they pop up. And again, there are going to be a few units due to the sap mechanic that are going to get to our pyre, but we're not really at risk there. And having the Demon Fiend there is just fantastic for clearing out these extra units. Even this armor, you know, it may seem like a small thing, but that armor does end up making a difference when our train stewards end up absorbing a lot of the hits. You know, a lot of these units are doing 10 damage. With the extra armor there, that means our train stewards can take 2 hits, which is, it's not nothing. It does mean that Seraph will end up spawning more units at the top, but actually that's totally fine. And now you see we're getting to the point where, you know, we're still burning through all the units, but it's not like, you know, we're able to kill everything every single time. And we've got a few more rounds before Relentless. I think this is one of those where I really don't have quite enough regen, so we are going to take a little bit of damage. And these guys do pack a punch, but Hey, you can see already. So with the regen that we had, somewhere around 28, 27 regen, we're totally fine. And with our Demon Fiend doing 100 damage per hit, really gets through that quite quickly. So we're about about a minute ahead. So we're not going crazy here, but definitely looking like our PB time right now. And we get now into the Melting Remnant run. Now this run's really interesting. I reroll a lot here. You'll see that in just a minute. Trying to find the right setup. The ideal setup, if you just like really luck into this, the ideal setup is to get Crushing Demise as your uncommon card, and then to get your Reform, your Molded as your common card. Then you have all the cards you need to get set up. And after re-rolling for a little while, I keep thinking, you know what, if I just get a Reform, I'm going to go for it. And you'll see I do this several times. We get a Reform, and then we check, and same story happens a few times. Okay, yeah, it's all fine. We take the coins, we get into it, and no Burn Bright. And with this run, you really rely on your champion here. And it's true of a lot of the runs, right? The champion in these early covenants is so strong, you can more or less rely on it. Think, oh great, we get this candle, and no Burn Bright. So now I'm starting to think, you know what, I have a Crushing Demise, I have a way to extend Burnout, I think we're okay here. And we get the Burn Bright, we're gonna go for it. Now one mistake I made several times is I kept thinking that I had the candle, and so I would play my dregs and wonder why my dregs aren't doing AoE, because somehow in my brain I had assumed that run happened at the same time. So now what we're hoping for, and I think it's pretty easy to get here, but I'm getting a little anxious now because my Rector Flicker is going to burn out next turn, and luckily I'm able to draw them. I think it was guaranteed I get one of them, but this basically makes these first few encounters very trivial. So what do we want here? We want a way to reform, so of course I skip it like an idiot. So that was what I needed, was the Wicked Blaze. Making it 0 cost or making it 1 cost with holdover is everything that I needed to make this run work. But of course, I'm going too fast and skip it. And now what we want is a free holdover Crushing Demise. And the idea with this is we're just going to play Crushing Demise over and over to pick off the extra units, and then use Rector Flicker in order to kill the boss. Now this only works if we have some way of bringing our Rector Flicker back. Currently we don't. We do have an extension which will help with the earlier fights, even up through Daedalus. Having an extension is enough, but for sure the later fights you need to be able to bring back your Rector Flicker multiple times. So I'm getting a little bit nervous. I'm going to play the Crushing Demise just to make sure that it does stay. We end up being just fine though. So we're able to kill the boss. But after Daedalus, if we don't get a reform, we're in trouble. And the fact that I skipped one is making me feel really nervous. I even was half a second considering taking another one of the burnout extenders. But the fact is, like, you're going to die from damage to the bosses, not from your burnout at that point. So we need to find a way to bring him back. So I'm getting a little bit stressed out. I double stack one of the burnout applicators in order to make sure that my Rector Flicker stays alive long enough. But I'm starting to get really nervous because I don't have any way to bring him back. I have the Crushing Demise, which is great. And then I consider, let's play on the middle floor. Same reason as the last time with the Sentient. Just want to avoid taking extra damage, or sorry, not Sentient, with the Stygian Guard run. And now we have that bottom floor where we can use Crushing Demise to pick off enemies. And then we have the middle floor to do all the damage. So again, we Crushing Demise, pick off one of the units, try to get some early damage. None of this really matters. It's just getting things out of our deck in the end. And yeah, we're just trying to hopefully keep our Rector Flicker alive long enough. It does get a little bit dicey when we're starting to get these bombs out, because now the concern is not just Rector Flicker surviving from burnout. It's also Rector Flicker surviving, just surviving from damage, right? Like Daedalus does a lot of damage. So I'm starting to feel a little bit nervous. We do put another morsel maker, and then that just happens to be almost exactly the amount of damage that we need. The extra health ended up doing it for us. And then I see Remnant Pack. And I'm thinking to myself, that is a way to bring back Rector Flicker. So that's the route I'm going to go. The goal is you keep Rector Flicker alive long enough that you can play the Pact on him. You give him Endless, and then you just keep playing him over and over again. It's not quite as good as Reform, because one of the benefits of Reform is that you get to add more burnout, so he'll live longer. But it's still good enough for most of these fights. That's basically 9 hits of, or 9 ticks of damage from our Rector Flicker. You also notice there I duplicated the Crushing Demise. Getting 2 of them is really ideal. Best is to get 3. With 3, you can clear off entire waves of enemies with just Crushing Demises. So we luck out, we get the Endless Pack, and now I'm not going to play the Burnout Extenders because I want to keep the Rector Flicker alive, but I actually want him to die at least once so that I have a chance to bring him back before the boss. Now in this case we do decide to apply it just so we can get some early damage. It also might have been okay to not, but one of the better things I could have done in hindsight, and you'll see me do this a lot later on, is you can Crushing Demise your own Rector Flicker the turn before you want to play him with full burnout, which is what would have been an optimal. I would have had an extra 2 hits with him if I'd done it that way. So now we have 3 Crushing Demises. This is really the ideal setup. And the goal is to just play out the Crushing Demises to clear the floors, and then play out our Rector Flicker to kill off the bosses. And here I'm totally fine putting Rector Flicker on the bottom. I'm even okay if he dies, because in the end we're just going to bring him back. I'm not even going to, now that I have... now one thing I need to be careful about is I need to extend enough burnout until I get the Remnant Pact. If I don't get the Remnant Pact and I haven't increased his burnout, then he could just die. And you'll notice, maybe spoilers, you'll notice I actually make a pretty huge mistake later on in this fight, forgetting how Endless works in this particular deck. But you'll see here, I thought about, do I even extend the burnout? It doesn't make a lot of sense. We're going to kill all of the backliners anyway, so then the goal is just keep them alive there. We can pick off the backliner with Crushing Demise, and then play out a morsel just to absorb one of the hits. And I'm wondering, what do I do here? And ended up just putting some morsels out. They do stay with him, so those buffs do stick around, which is just great. And then I'm thinking, we should be able to survive. It ends up being pretty close. We had another 2 hits, but still pretty close. And you'll see there I skipped a molded, but I think we're in pretty good shape here with the Endless. And this next artifact really puts the run together. Not this one. Just kidding. It's this one in here. Yeah, Enhance on Death. Because what this means now is if I Crushing Demise my own Rector Flicker, every time he'll add 10 more damage. And if I'm doing that every single fight, that can add a good 80 to 100 damage onto my Rector Flicker by the time we get to Relentless mode. And so what I think about early is right at this moment I think, if I start Crushing Demise after I put the Endless on him, we'll be set. We won't have any issues with Rector Flicker. And now I'm thinking again, we don't have the Endless Pact yet, but we're guaranteed to get it or one of the other cards. We ended up getting it now. And first we need to clear out this top floor. And we're totally fine with the Rector Flicker dying, right? So we want him to die to come back. Now with 10 extra damage. Play him out to do some damage to Fel. And I think it's at this point that I realize, maybe it's not. that I should start just crushing demise, putting crushing demise on my own Rector Flicker. I can't remember. I think it's during this fight though. I'm like, oh no, because he was already burning out. So I think it's on the later fights that I start doing that. And here you see we just add the burnout extenders. We just do one because we could see from the X that he's dying not from burnout but dying from just pure damage. This allows us to get another set of hits. We can get some damage shield on him to get more hits. And then we're in totally fine shape here. We play him out and kill him in one hit. But this is what ends up being so good about this endless is you miss all of the reform animations. And those reform animations are about 1.5 seconds long. And if you consider that you're doing it almost every single turn, that adds up to, I would say, about 1.5 to 2 minutes of time just watching reform triggers. So by the fact that we can have endless instead, you eliminate that whole set of triggers. And I think that's why we end up getting such a clean overall Melting Remnant run, is just because we don't have to watch all those reform animations every single time. And not only the reform animation, but you have to make sure you're clicking, so there's brain power involved. With Endless, there's no brain power, and this is the mistake. I realized very quickly, where's my Rector Flicker? Oh, that's right. I killed him before I got Endless on him. So this was my mistake. I think it ends up costing me about 35, 40 seconds. So it's not devastating, but it does put a serious dent in the what had been a very commanding lead with the speedrun so far. So then we just play out Rector Flicker. We crushing demise him. This gets him 10 extra damage every turn, and we're just stacking him up for the boss. And we're able to clean out all the floors with all 3 of our crushing demises. In these early covenants, you're rarely going to see more than 3 units at a time. It does happen, but not so common. We will use it here to pick off the backliner, and there you can see we're already doing just a real insane amount of damage. Bring him back once, and the boss is dead. And if you look right now, you see we were at about estimated 48 minutes. We're on Seraph, and we're almost done. So this is where we get the massive time savings, is exactly on this fight. I do duplicate the hallowed drippings. I do check to see. I grab an extinguish trigger that means absolutely nothing, and but it's fine. Just to see if there was something that would be beneficial. I was a little bit nervous whether we're going to get enough damage to kill Seraph, because in the end we only can take so many hits with the Rector Flicker. He's not gaining health. He's only gaining damage. So we're always going to be at the point where 3 hits and dead. Or not, I guess not 3, 5 hits and dead. So now we get the upgrade here. We're just going to clear out minions. One unfortunate thing about this particular set of enemy units is that for some reason they take a little bit longer, their animations take a little bit longer to process the kills there because of the harvest triggers. So those harvest triggers, it's not a lot, but it does add up, having all these harvest triggers going off. See, like these ones are much cleaner. There's no harvest triggers, they just die right away. But these ones, this one in the front here, it gets the harvest triggers, and then yeah, you have to watch those animations. And here I say, let's not take any pyre damage. We're already a little bit low, so we don't even have full pyre health. And here, since I know I'm going to play all 3 right there, thought, let's just put Rector Flicker there as well. Doesn't really matter now what floor we put him on, as long as at the end we put him on the bottom floor. Now we're on to the final wave. So we clear 1, 2, clear 1 at the top, and put out Rector Flicker, and then we're just looking to get it exactly equal with the amount of damage we're taking and the amount of burnout that we have. So we're looking for the red X and then no more with the hallowed drippings. So again, we apply 1 to give extra hits onto Seraph, and we're totally fine. I mean, it's fairly close, but even without adding the extra 1, just the 3 hits is enough to kill. So there we go. Yeah, we're a solid 4 minutes ahead. Currently looking at a potential 52-minute overall run. So now we're going into the final run, and this one can be a real killer just on the rerolls, getting that void binding. And I think here we even reroll for at least a minute, minute and a half before we find a good void binding run. And you know, it makes me consider, should we find a different, more reliable, more consistent run like we have with the Awoken and Stygian Guard? There's probably another setup which is about as good as the void binding, but it's hard to beat it. It's so brainless and it's so straightforward. It's one of those where it's like, even if it's not the fastest run you'll ever see, it is certainly one of the most consistent runs once you get the void binding. But man, these rerolls are brutal. And I'm looking right now, you know, 15 minutes to do an Umbra run. And Umbra runs are pretty consistently about 8 minutes once you get into it. So looking like easily under an hour, possibly world record at this point. Just depends on how fast we get into it and then if we get the right combination to survive. So again, what we're looking for is Void Binding as our uncommon card. We don't care about the commons, we don't care about the artifact, but you do need Trample Penumbra. The last thing we want to look for is we just want to avoid Seraph the Diligent. It's not impossible to play around it, but it's really difficult with Void Binding in particular. Even compared to some of the other runs, I would say probably Hellhorn is the most difficult to play around, and in that case you can't risk it. But it's hard with Void Binding runs because Void Binding, you need other free spells, right? You have so much Ember Drain that if you don't have other free spells that you can play, you're gonna really struggle. And as you see, we've been rolling for a while now, about 2 minutes of re-rolls, and I'm starting to get a little stressed out. I'm like, man, we got all of that time savings on that Melting Remnant run, and now we're burning through it like crazy waiting for these Void Bindings. We finally get one, and we check the champion, and no trample. And I'm thinking, do we go Architect? And I'm like, no, you can't do it. You just can't. It's too hard without. But we luck immediately into a Void Binding with Temperament, with Trample. So ended up being just fine, but I was getting very nervous there that we had lost all of our time. We ended up about 3 minutes almost of re-rolls before we got into the run. But now we're looking good. So if we can stay on to a standard, about 8-minute run with Umbra, then we're in good shape. And I'm doing all this stuff to try to kill off this unit, and I'm thinking, do I play it? And I'm like, no, just don't bother. Just get on with it. Focus on clearing the run, and we kill the boss very easily. What's also really nice about this run, and it comes into play a few times, is we end up starting with lifesteal as well. And it helps, I would say, early on, where we have a lot of cards. And so while we're waiting for Void Binding to show up, I don't even know why I re-rolled there. There was nothing I could have gotten that would have been good enough. And we wouldn't have been able to afford a holdover. But, since we don't have holdover, we just have the double stacked Void Binding. Those lifesteal triggers end up saving us with a lot of these early fights, making sure that we aren't dying while we're waiting for Void Binding to show up. This gets pretty annoying. Any kinds of blights are just really difficult to deal with. These are the most I don't know, they're the least annoying of all of the blights because they don't have an animation and they don't do damage to your pyre, but it's still kind of annoying to have your draws go a little bit slower. Check artifact, nothing really good, so we just skip and move on. And we should be totally fine for Daedalus. It really depends. The one Daedalus that's quite difficult to deal with, as I mentioned, is when you have the extinguish triggers. I get them here, and so I instantly am like, okay, do we still play on the bottom floor? And then I remembered I have all the lifesteal. And that's the real issue, right? With the Void Bindings, they'll bust right through that. They'll get right through your damage shield. You can see right there, we got pretty low health. But with lifesteal, it really negates a lot of that risk, because even if we take a huge burst of damage, we heal it all right back up with a lifesteal. So this is really the fight where I would say that lifesteal came in super handy. Now, we could have played differently. We could have played on a different floor to try to get around it, but ends up working out really well for us. Even here, right, that lifesteal just guarantees we kill Daedalus. Now after this point, it's now not so useful because we could start duplicating our void bindings. We can reduce the risk that we don't get void bindings early, and then they end up, you know, not being so great. I think I still end up playing them all the way through Fell, but about after Daedalus is when they stop being so useful. And I decided earlier on, I'm not going to go for the holdover. I'm just going to eliminate all the garbage in my deck that I'm not playing to make my deck more consistent. The one caveat with this is the one I mentioned earlier. Because it doesn't have holdover, I can't predict which slot the void binding is going to be in. But I don't know. It probably adds up to some time loss, but not so much in the end. I mean, I'm playing them out pretty fast even still. So, but it would definitely be faster to just be able to do mash, you know, the 5 key or the 4 key because it's on holdover. And I'm really checking every single Relentless. I'm really checking red X. If it's red X, I just go. And even though in the past I've often trained myself to just, you know, play out everything even still, I'm trying to get to the point where, you know, that extra second or two of just playing a card, if you can avoid it, you should. And that's what I'm trying to train myself on, is just look for red X. If it's there, I end turn right away. So checking time, right? We are at 51 minutes and we're halfway through. So again, standard run is around 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes for the Umber run with Void Binding. So assuming we stay on target, we could even be 54, 55 minutes. Again, he just can't burn through all that damage shield. So when you think about that with a double stacked, you're getting, is it 4 damage shield per play or 8 damage shield per play? You're playing 2 of them, so you get 8 damage shield about per turn. Yeah, it's just insane to try to burn through that. That was a mistake. Scrolled down on accident. I thought I'd already clicked on the duplicate, and I was scrolling down to get to the void binding. That's one other thing to note is cards always show up in alphabetical order. So cards like Void Binding or Urchin Spines, they're always going to be at the bottom. Compare that with like the Bramble, you know, when we were doing Bramble Ash runs, Bramble Ash was great because it always showed up at the top of your deck. And it's those like little things that when you're playing normal, you know, Hell Rush or daily challenges or just standard runs, you don't think about that kind of thing because you can take your time. But man, in speedrunning, you start to notice all these little tiny things. Like I can tell you all the cards that I hate just due to their animation speeds. One of the worst being the Awoken Rail Spike. It's pretty bad. You don't ever try to speedrun with the Awoken Rail Spike, but here we're totally fine. I even predicted that I had enough damage shield before, just to avoid having to take another turn of playing out Void Bindings. So we're on the final stretch now. We've just got Ring 7 and Seraph, and then we are finished with the run. And everything's looking great. We're at 53 minutes, well under an hour, well below world record pace. World record pace at this time was just over 59 minutes. And yeah, I'm just feeling really good at this point, thinking that we'll probably get world record off of this run. Now, who knows how long it lasts. I will say that Melting Remnant run, honestly, it would be hard to duplicate that. You could aim for it, but it's hard. To aim for rare cards in the middle of your run is very risky. It's almost on par with going for a Shadow Siege build. I mean, Shadow Siege builds are insanely fast. Sub 5 minutes. But you have to get Shadow Siege, and you have to get Sketches of Salvation, and trying to roll for that during an all-seeded or an all-unseeded run is just insane. So we are a little bit below pace for just this run itself, but we're still well below pace. Or sorry, we're much faster than pace when it comes to the overall run. Now here, I get a little bit nervous because you'll start to see they're sometimes leaking through. This is the one issue with holdover when you have less draw than you have cards, Because we're leaking enemies, and these are not weak enemies. These are the Seraph the Temperate enemies who have multi-strike and 10 damage base. So I'm getting a little bit nervous. Are we going to die to some of these, you know, side minions because we can't get enough damage on our champion here? But ends up being totally fine. Needed to use both Void Bindings, but we managed to kill Seraph. And with that, we get a 55-minute, 10-second all clans unseeded speedrun. Currently the world record. We'll see how long it takes for Sinis or Chance Eluded or Narninian. Those are the main ones. Main other players I know are trying to get the speedruns through. Let's see if any of them can break it. I expect that they will. But really enjoyed this run. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you liked the video, please click like, subscribe, watch my other videos, and I will check you out in my next video. This has been Nate. You can also call me Nathan, but please never call me Nathaniel.